Hi there guys, Bushcraft here. Now in today's video what I'll be doing is I'll be going over different kinds of knives you can use for bushcraft or survival. Now I'm not going to be going over every single knife in this video. I do have a bunch with me, but they'll primarily be for examples on the pros and the cons of certain kinds of knives. I'll also be showing you guys the worst knife to the best knife you can take out for bushcraft and survival. I'll be going over the pros and cons of cheap knives. I'll also be going over the pros and cons of like your mid-tier knives, and also I'll be going over the pros and cons of some of your more expensive knives. I'm going to try to keep things short, simple, and to the point like I normally do. I'm not going to be going over every single knife that I have in this video. Like some of them are specifically going to be used as examples of what not to take out in the woods with you, especially if it's something you're going to be relying on. Like you need to make sure that you have a good knife that's going to last you a little bit, especially in that wilderness setting where you may have to rely on that knife to survive. So I've got quite a few options here, and this video is also for those of you who are wanting to get into the art of wilderness bushcraft and survival. So this may help some of you out who have little to no experience with knives. So this may give you a pointer to what kind of knives to look out for that you could possibly like using. The only issue is that there is thousands upon thousands of knives on the market today. There are some that I have that probably don't even make anymore. So I'm not even going to include any of the links to any of these knives. And I'm not here to knock anybody for using a cheap knife, because I was there at one point. Think about it. I'm using this guy for quite a few videos. This is a knife I made myself for next to nothing. If you're just starting out, a cheap knife may be your best bet, because first of all, it's going to allow you to learn how to use a knife. Secondly, it's going to teach you like the pros and the cons of having a better quality knife than that. And finally, it's just a good learning experience to start off with something cheap. Sometimes I do like to challenge myself and use a cheaper knife just because it allows me to appreciate the better quality tools that I have. There's a lot of tools you can get out there in today's market, both knives, hatchets, axes, saws, you name it. Pretty much anything that can be used for bushcraft or survival, you can buy out there in today's market. It's all a personal preference. So whatever you prefer, that's what I'd recommend taking out and using. Didn't bring anything too crazy out. Like I just brought some very basic knives out here to show you. So let's get right to that. Now, I do want to give a small shout out to one of my subscribers. Now, his YouTube channel is Outlaw Camper, and he has been one of the few people that has been supporting me throughout this whole time by showing me the support, watching my videos, putting likes on the videos, and commenting. He's been one of those few guys that has been a reoccurring sub. So thank you for watching my videos and also for showing some support along the way. I also want to do another shout out to my buddy from work and his significant other for also supporting me throughout this whole ordeal, for showing the type of love and support they do for my videos. They've watched every single video that I've uploaded from the very beginning to this one right now. And I just want to say a special thanks to them, because they've also helped give me some ideas on what they want to see. And so I've been trying to do that as much as possible. So some of the ideas in my videos are from them, and then some of them are from myself. Some of them are inspirations from other YouTube channels that I've taken into my own hands and put my own twist on them. So if I knew how to put a link in the description of this video, I would actually put a link down in there for you guys to go check out Outlaw Camper. But he has commented on some of my videos, and that's probably the easiest way I can tell you guys to actually, go to his channels to find his comments in one of those videos. And that's probably the quickest and easiest way I can tell you guys to do that. Now, you don't have to watch the whole video if you don't want to. All you have to do is just go to the video, go to the comments section, and find his name on one of the videos. So that's probably the easiest way I know to kind of tell you guys to go check his channel out. I did check his channel out, and his stuff is pretty cool. All right, so what I got here are kind of a bunch of cheaper folders you can get. Personally, I like knives like this that have a straight edge on them. I try and stay away from knives like this that have a serrated edge on them, just because there is issues that I've noticed while using knives with serrated edges. It's not the best for bushcraft and survival tasks. Now, a knife like this that has a straight edge on it is one of the best knives you can actually use, in my opinion. You can actually choke up on the blade a little bit to be able to do some finer carving tasks. So a knife like this, in my opinion, is far superior to a knife with a serrated blade. Now, I know a lot of you may have your own opinions on serrated blades versus fine edge blades, but I prefer, obviously, a fine edge blade over a serrated blade any day. So this guy right here, I'm not a fan of for any kind of survival or bushcraft stuff, unless it's urban survival. And that is because this is more of a fighting knife than it is a bushcraft or survival knife, because of the taunted blade on this. But it's not a very practical knife to have for wilderness, bushcraft, or survival. Same thing goes for this little guy. Like, this is not a very practical knife at all for any kind of bushcraft or survival tasks. Whenever it comes to Swiss Army knife style knives, stay away from the cheap and chintzy knives like these, because they're just going to break on you and they're not going to last very long. If you're going to buy a Swiss Army knife, honestly, go ahead and spend the money and get yourself a Victorinox. Doesn't matter what kind. This is a Victorinox hiker, and this is the only one of these I own, but I've had this guy for about 4 years now, and it has been one of the best Swiss Army knives I've ever used, period. The main thing about Victorinox is that these are the original Swiss Army knives, and there's a reason for why I have this guy, because I upgraded from these cheap and chintzy Swiss Army knife knockoffs to this guy here. This is the only Victorinox I own, so I will probably buy some more in the future. This guy is my jackknife. There's a small blade here. It's also got a large blade. It's also got one of the best little saws that I've ever seen on any kind of pocket knife. Has your standard can opener with flat head on it. It also has your standard bottle opener with another flat head on it. So it does also have your Phillips head on it. And we also have our sewing awl. And also we have your stereotypical tweezers. And we also have your stereotypical toothpick as well. So that's all of these kind of cheaper knives. Now personally, I would not take any of these knives right here out into the woods. The only knife out of all of these guys I'd take out would be the trusty old Victorinox. It's the only knife I would actually choose out of any of these guys. Just because of the versatility of this knife and the quality is far superior to all of these knives here. Alright, so what I got here is a bunch of cheap full tang knives. This right here is a Morakniv. This is the most expensive knife out of this whole lot. And this was my original bushcraft knife that I used for a number of years. This knife has been through a lot over the past, I want to say, 9 years I've had this thing. Then we just have a couple of cheap kitchen knives. This is just a cheap Black & Decker knife. This was actually one of my first survival knives, if you want to call it that. And we have this knife here. You guys have seen this. This knife here was originally featured in my Dollar General Survival series. So I still use this guy, and I always carry this guy in my bag that I bring out in my videos, just because I do like using this guy every once in a while. And this is kind of turned into my foraging knife. And these three here are my cheap homemade knives. So this guy right here is made out of an old knife blade that broke. I just fashioned it to an actual little knife, and I just modified it a little bit to create myself a fully functioning knife. And the knife sheath is just made out of electrical tape and a little bit of cardboard. And this guy right here is the little brother to this guy that we just kind of went over the last video. So I'm not even really going to bother going over this guy. I just figured I'd bring it out just to show you guys that, you know, cheap DIY knives like these can be used in bushcraft and survival stuff. Yes, this does have the same kind of sheath that this guy right here had. I am planning on making some knife sheaths just like this for pretty much all of these knives except for my Mora. Just all around a good DIY knife that I made. And I absolutely love this knife sheath compared to this style knife sheath that I had originally. So now we're kind of getting into more of the expensive or more pricey tools you can use for bushcraft and survival. Obviously, you guys have seen this knife here in plenty of videos. This is my SE Azula 2. This is my main EDC knife I carry. This knife here costs about $100 to $120, depending on where you get it from and what your sales tax is. This knife is kind of pricey, but this is just like the perfect little survival knife that I've used this guy a lot for doing a lot of bushcraft and survival stuff since I got it about 6 months ago. This guy right here is next in line for being the most expensive. And what this is a Gerber LMF2. Hi there guys. Sorry to interrupt this part of the video. I realized during the editing process that I had messed up on going over one of the knives. So that's what the segment here is going to be about. So after this segment, I'm going to be making a meal and I will record that and include that in this video. So this is the following day. I decided to come out here and re-record the segment on this knife right here. This is the Gerber LMF2. So the Gerber LMF2, this is a really, really good knife. I want to go over the sheath first. Now, the main reason for why I'm doing it this way compared to how I did it in the other segment is because I messed up on the recording of this knife. So I'm going to go in depth of this specific knife because it is an important one. And this is an older knife that I got. I got this, what, 8 years ago. So there's quite a few cool and unique things about this entire knife and the sheath combined. So right out the gate, this right here is the sheath itself. On this whole section, this is all rubberized plastic. As you can see, it has all these little holes and loops in it. That is for different configurations of how you can attach this thing. Another thing you probably notice is this slit right here. That is a carbide knife sharpener. Now you can take this whole plastic part right here off of the nylon webbing sheath and have this as a different unit. You can attach this in several different ways. It's actually really cool. So in the back you have 2 molly webbing straps here. Now that can be used to attach to any kind of tactical backpack, any kind of tactical vest, or really anything that you want to attach this stuff to. So you can even take these and attach them to your belt loops if you wanted to. And also, as you can see, there's a space down here, and there's also, if you're looking there, there's Velcro right there. And there's also Velcro on the inside of this little space here. Now those are for leg straps. So you can also attach this to your shin so you can carry it there instead. The thing I like to do with this is I just like to use a belt loop here and also one of those straps and attach it to my thigh. I cannot find the straps to demonstrate that to you, so I just figured I'd go over that. One other key function of this knife sheath is that this knife locks in place. You're gonna have to press on it like that, pull the knife out, and this is the Gerber LMF2. One of the first things you'll notice about this knife is that it has a half serrated and half fine edge blade on it. Now, I'm not a fan of half fine edge and half serrated edge blades, but this is hands down one of the best blades I've used with that configuration. This thing has very thick steel on it. I believe this is about a 1/4 inch thick. It has a rubberized handle, and there's one cool function and story about this knife for why it is the way that it is. Now, the tang from the blade comes down to roughly about here. So there's a space right in between here, about the width of my finger, that's in between the tang of the knife and also the pommel here. And the reason for that is because this knife was adopted by the US military, or it was contracted, one of the two, for pilots, specifically pilots that, pilot aircraft. And the reason why there's that gap in between the pommel and the knife blade is because if you're in any kind of like heli crash or anything like that, if you have to cut your way out from live wires, if you have a full tang knife or any kind of knife that has a rat tail tang in it, you're going to get basically shocked or electrocuted. So because this has a space in between here, it has the rubberized part of the handle there as a buffer, what happens is that it's not going to ground you. So if you cut through live wires, you're not going to get shocked, you're not going to get electrocuted, or any of that stuff. Like, the chances of that happening are lower whenever you use this knife for those purposes. Now, the story is behind this in particular knife is that this was issued to the military at some point. specifically to the U.S. military. I'm not sure if it's issued to any specific branches of our military, but this was a knife that was, not this specific one, but this model of knife was used in the U.S. military as far as I'm aware. This thing has a lot of really cool uses to it. I'm also not sure if any other countries had adopted this knife at all either. So those 3 holes, what those do is that they actually help aid in attaching this to a stick to be able to make a spear. So I've done that in the past, and I've put this knife through several torture tests, and this thing is it's a great knife. It really is for the price. Now, the pommel here, you notice it looks kind of weird. It's not like your traditional style pommel you normally see on any kind of survival or bushcraft knife, or really any knife in general. Well, this hole here can be used as like a lanyard hole. This right here is a glass breaker, that's what that point is. And then this flat spot you see right here is basically a small hammer. This knife, it feels really, really good in the hand. There is a couple pros and there is a couple cons to this knife. The biggest pro to this knife is the fact that it's a solid knife and it feels really, really good in the hand to use. The major con that I have with this knife in particular is after a lot of heavy use, the blade does start to move inside the handle. Listen. That's the blade moving very lightly back and forth. And that is from batoning. That is also from using it as a spear to test out how it functions as a spear, and among other things. That's just general wear and tear and damage that was done to the inside of this, because I believe that there is a little bit of plastic kind of holding certain parts of this together in the inside. So other than that, this is a great knife. It's also made in USA. It's more made in Portland, Oregon. This thing does have a very sharp 90-degree spine on it, so this thing does work very well with ferrocerium rods. So one of the versions of this knife has a green rubber handle, and also certain parts of the sheath were green too. Then there was 1 or 2 that was tan, similar thing, like they had a tan handle, and certain parts of the sheath were tan as well. And originally I wanted to get one of the tan ones, but this is the only one I could find. Whenever I looked into these knives, I was finding prices anywhere from 80 to 120 bucks, depending on the color and availability and where I got it from. Now, this one here I bought from Dick's Sporting Goods. I bought it online, and I paid, I think it's 110 bucks for this knife and knife sheath combined. It's well worth the money. So I'm sorry that I kind of had to come out here the next day to record this and go over this knife, because I did mess that up because I was not in frame at all, and I didn't realize it until I was editing the video this morning. So I came out here to re-record that for you guys. So now later on in the video, I will actually be recording myself cook a meal for you guys. It's going to be a super simple meal. It's not going to be anything too crazy, and I hope you guys are going to find that little meal to be hopefully kind of interesting and maybe even a good meal. I would consider this as a lightweight backpacker style meal. Now I do have these 2 reversed here in terms of price. So this guy right here is a handmade knife. Now I did not make this. This whole thing here is handmade, not by me, but by somebody else who makes knives. And this right here is kind of like your traditional style of bushcraft knife. It's more of a hunting knife than anything else. Which for a bushcraft knife, yeah, this guy works. It definitely gets the job done. It's not my go-to. Yeah, any kind of knife like this is generally going to be a good knife. Now, I don't know exactly how much it costed. Like I said, it was a gift. I'm guessing because of the quality of everything here, it's probably close to 50 to 70 bucks for this guy right here. Now, a lot of you are probably eyeballing this thing. So this right here is a Camillus kukri. This does not come in this configuration. I did this myself. So I have just a fine file here that I use to sharpen this tool with. Right here is a really, really good piece of gear, because there has been times where I've just carried this kukri with me, because this functions as both an axe or a hatchet and also a knife. Essentially, this is just one giant knife. This does have a nice sharp 90-degree spine on it. This thing is able to hold a razor sharp edge. This thing has been used quite substantially over the years. No, this is not from wear. This is the actual design of this blade. And Camillus is a really good, cheap brand that you can get a lot of really good, high quality knives from. So I'd recommend going with Camillus if you're looking for a good, cheap brand to kind of go with certain tools like kukris, hatchets, knives, and even certain entrenching tools Camillus makes are actually half decent. Camillus is a brand that I would strongly recommend that you actually get your hands on because they're cheap, they're high quality for the price, and they are just really, really good tools. Now this right here is kind of your traditional style woodsman's knife. It's from like the early 1900s. This style of knife would have been really popular, but the only issue that I have with this knife is what's going on inside the handle. I believe this is a rat tail tang. Instead of it being full tang, like this little guy right here, basically it's a rod going through right in here. This rod is rather made from the actual knife blade itself, or it is welded in place. That's typically like what I've noticed with these kind of knives. Now, I would not use this for doing anything crazy. And this is not really a bushcraft knife, but if this is what you can find, this will suffice. This will definitely get the job done. Probably the best version of this style of knife to go with is K-bar. And last but not least, we have this guy right here. This was actually one of my uncle's hunting knives. Like, there is something you'll notice about all my full tang knives I actually prefer using, is that they are all thicker steel. If you're going to be doing any kind of batoning, thicker steel is what you want. It's not going to bend very easily, it's not going to break very easily, and they have more heft to them, so that way you can actually chop wood with them. Hence, this guy right here, compared to the rest of these, this is the cheapest one out of the whole lot. You kind of see where I got the idea for the handle on this guy. And I was like, you know what, that's actually not a bad idea. So that's why this guy right here has a similar style handle to it. This is kind of like a knife you'd find at a yard sale or a flea market. And a knife like this will do just fine for any kind of bushcraft or survival tasks. So one of the things we'll be needing for this meal is some water, because we will have to boil some water up for this meal. Now in this mesh bag here is what I have my food in. I've got pretty much nothing but non-perishable food here. So I got some rice and a couple bouillon cubes. I got some little Bridgeford smoked sausages. And the final ingredient is Old Trapper old-fashioned flavored beef jerky. So one of the first things we'll be doing is cutting up some of these sausages here. And after I do that, I'll be cutting up some of the jerky too. I grab a decent handful of this jerky and start cutting this all up. This jerky is so good. Now this little piece here has got a little bit of fat on it. It's going to help add some flavor to it. So that is all I need cutting board and knife for. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab both my bouillon cubes out. I'm going to open these guys up, throw these in here. Yeah, that just happened. That's fine. Now I'm going to measure out to about 8 ounces. Now what we're going to do is we're going to start boiling this water and rehydrating all the meat that we have in here. It's only been a couple minutes, but as you can see, that water is starting to turn a brownish color. So this is starting to get a nice head on it. Now that is all the scum from the meat, which I want to keep that in there just because I want to have as much flavor as possible. The jerky is starting to rehydrate pretty well. I want this to be a nice rolling boil though, so that I can make sure the stuff's actually rehydrating properly. Just look at that, it's starting to get a nice little boil. So now I'm going to take my rice and dump it in there. Dumping this whole little jar of rice in there. Obviously I want to stir it so that way none of the rice gets burnt or stuck at the bottom. So this meal's looking pretty good so far. Now the rice is starting to rehydrate. Oh, that smells so good. So this is kind of a budget-friendly backpacking meal that anybody can make. It's not hard to make at all. And at the end of the day, this is going to make a really good hearty meal. But this right here is good enough for me because it's what I had. So I figured I'd throw this together for a quick segment of this video for you guys. Okay. I'd say she's done. She's starting to stick to the bottom. Wrong way. This is going to be a good hearty meal. It's kind of turned into a little bit of a gravy. So this should taste amazing. But yeah, look at that. Don't tell me that does not look good. You can see how thick that is. This is exactly what I am looking for. So here's a little update on the food. So this food is starting to thicken up beautifully. It's kind of stick to your ribs meal that you want if you're out there backpacking or hiking, camping, whatever. This is 100% the kind of meal you want to actually get yourself. Look at that big heaping amount of food right there. This probably took about, I want to say, 15-20 minutes to make this meal. It's not a hard meal to make, and it is a very good meal. So I got some rice, 1 piece of jerky, and 1 piece of sausage on here. All right, the flavor is amazing. There's only one thing consistency-wise, is I didn't leave the rice in here long enough to fully cook. So it is just a tad bit crunchy, but it's soft enough. So this is a pretty good meal. This is one of my go-tos, one of my favorites. So I may actually make a couple more of these meals, a specific meal later on down the road, a couple other videos, other than the video I got planned for later on this weekend. You guys hopefully will be seeing. All of the knives I've showed in this video are just to show you guys different kind of knives that you can start off with. This video is kind of geared towards those of you who are wanting to get into survival and bushcraft stuff, and you may be kind of confused on what to get and what not to get in terms of knives. You don't really need to have any expensive gear to really go out there and do the survival and bushcraft stuff. Personally, if you're just starting out, I'd recommend starting off with the cheaper stuff and then working your way up to the more expensive stuff. So that way you can kind of figure out what you want, you can figure out exactly what works for you, and you can also kind of figure out like what kind of tools you want to carry with you. Like, I just want to help some of you out, some of you who are just starting out in this stuff. That's the main reason for why I did this video. I'm looking at doing a 24-hour survival challenge. Now this one's going to be a little more interesting than the Dollar General challenge. I only take out 3 to 4 items. I want you guys to pick one of the knives I showed you in this video. I'm going to give you guys 1 day to pick a knife. If you guys do not pick the knife, I will be picking the knife myself, and I will actually be using the knife that I pick in that survival challenge. So if you guys want to see me use one of those knives, leave a comment down below. Now, the amount of people that suggest the same knife is going to be the knife I'm going to be using. But I am for sure going to be taking a ferrous searing rod, a cooking pot, and possibly some cordage or a shelter. So I do want to make a better fire starting video for you guys at some point, because I know that first one I did, it's terrible. Like, I'm not gonna lie, the first 2 videos I did are bad, so I do kind of want to redo them. So, and I also have the microphones now, so it's gonna make it easier for you guys to hear me. I do have some plans for other DIY projects, so like, you guys have to stay tuned for that. And I've also got ideas for shelters, and also how to make different things for your camp, and like, the list goes on and on and on. There is so much stuff I want to do for you guys, but there is so little time that I have in my schedules most of the time to actually come out and do some of those things for you guys. Now, one thing I just happened to think about, I may actually take the cooking pot and make a small survival kit out of it. I'm not going to show you guys what I put in it until I get out in the woods and start recording the video, and then I will show you guys what I have in that. All right, thank you for watching this video, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you guys found it to be somewhat educational and informational, along with somewhat entertaining to a certain degree.